Okay, here is the story of Hades and Persephone. And it's pronounced Persephone, not Persephone. At the beginning of time, when the gods defeated the giants, the world was divided into three by the casting of lots. Zeus won the sky, and his brother Poseidon the sea. The underworld was left to Hades. He was a brooding, lonely god, and he begged Zeus to give him a wife from the land above. He had fallen in love with Persephone, the daughter of Demeter. Demeter was the most powerful of all the goddesses. She ruled over every living thing on earth, and without her nothing would grow. Zeus knew that she would never agree to let her daughter marry Hades, and he feared her anger if he dared ask such a question. But the king of the underworld was determined that Persephone would be his wife, and he decided to carry her off by force. For many days he waited and watched. Then one morning he heard that she was out in the meadows on the slopes of Mount Etna, picking flowers with the daughters of the ocean. These nymphs were very beautiful, but none of them so beautiful as the radiant Persephone. She outshone them as day outshines night. Zeus had conspired with Hades to help him trap her, and now at her feet she saw a most marvelous plant appear out of nowhere. It was a white narcissus with 100 flowers growing from its root, a thing so lovely and so fragrant that not only mortals but the gods themselves wondered at it. Okay, so let me just summarize what's happening so far. So Hades gets stuck with the underworld. We know this from the beginning of our unit when we read the story about Mother Earth and Father Heaven. Demeter is the goddess of the harvest and basically all plants and things that grow on earth. Hades falls in love with Demeter's daughter, Persephone, but he knew that Demeter would never ever let Hades have her and take her to the underworld. So the natural conclusion is that Hades decided to kidnap Persephone and make her his wife. So of course Zeus helps him with this because Zeus is just the worst. So they distract her with a beautiful flower called a narcissus. And later you guys are going to read the myth of Narcissus, which is the story of how this flower got started. So this tricky flower distracted her with its beauty and fragrance. And I'm going to continue here, okay? Persephone bent down to pick the flower, but as her fingers closed on it, the mountain split open with a terrible roaring noise, and from the depths came Hades riding on his black chariot, pulled by huge black horses. With a cry of triumph, he swept the terrified Persephone up into the chariot and galloped away down to the underworld. 2 others knew about this cruel thing. One was old Hecate, the witch goddess, who had heard how the girl cried out in terror. The other was Helios, god of the sun, who had seen the enormous black chariot rise up from the gas in the earth. I think this is supposed to say gash in the earth, and the greedy fingers of Hades snatching the girl away. But he was driving his sun horses across the sky and could not cease in his labors until the day was done. So Hecate is the goddess of witchcraft and ghosts, and she heard Persephone screaming. Helios is the god of the sun. He actually is the one who drags the sun across the sky, and that's why the sun moves its position throughout the day. He saw the whole thing, so Hecate and Helios know what happened. Demeter also heard the echo of her daughter's voice from far away on Mount Parthenia, and she set off at once to find her, wandering over the earth, not stopping to eat or drink, and taking no rest. On the 9th day she met old Hecate, who told her she had heard the girl cry out on Mount Etna. Then she met Helios, who confessed that he too knew what had happened, and that Zeus had plotted to help his brother Hades by setting the white flower at Persephone's feet. When she heard this, Demeter's grief turned to rage. She left Mount Olympus, where the gods lived, disguised herself as an old woman, and went to Eleusis, where she built a temple and spent long days there, mourning and weeping for her lost daughter. And she turned her back upon the earth and all that she must do there to make things grow. For a whole year the land set up no shoots, and the cattle pulled plows across the fields in vain. The white barley seed fell useless from the sower's hand and rotted where it lay. So Demeter is so upset that her daughter has been taken that she has neglected all the plants on earth and everything is dying. People began to starve, and in alarm Zeus sent Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, down to earth to plead mercy from the goddess of grain, or Demeter. But Demeter refused to listen to her, nor would she listen to Zeus's other messengers. Day after day she sat alone in her temple at Eleusis, vowing that she would never return to Olympus or allow any green thing to grow upon earth until Persephone was restored to her. At last Zeus sent his own son, Hermes, to plead with the god of the underworld. He knew the way well, for it was his task to lead the dead from earth down to hell. Sad-faced, he stood before Hades' throne, having taken off his winged sandals, and set aside the gold rod with which he saw the way. And the tragic of Persephone, that's supposed to say the tragic Persephone, so small on her great black throne, listened in silence as he pleaded with her husband. Great Hades, he said, upon earth people are dying because Demeter has put a curse on all of her crops. Release Persephone, I beg you. If you do not, Zeus will soon have no subjects to rule over. This kingdom too will die, for the world will be empty. And the tears ran down his face. So Hermes goes down to the underworld, and he sees Persephone and Hades, and he's trying to convince Hades to let Persephone go, because everything is dying on earth. But he says this kingdom too will die, for the world will be empty. So Hades knows that without humans, his underworld will be kind of useless. So if all the humans die and no more humans are born to continue the cycle, then his underworld is going to die as well. Hades thought for a moment, then rose and put his queen's hand into that of Hermes. Go, he said, since Zeus commands it. But do not forget me, Persephone. I have been kind to you. Remember, too, that all the souls here remain your subjects, wherever you may be. And he turned away sadly into his dark kingdom. So they returned joyously to earth, and Persephone was restored to her mother's arms. But then the goddess drew back, for the stain of a fruit was upon the girl's mouth. Did you eat in the underworld? She asked fearfully. Only a few seeds from a pomegranate, answered the innocent Persephone. Then Demeter knew that Hades had tricked them, for whoever eats food in the kingdom of the dead cannot ever escape from it. So Zeus made a pact with his brother, and for 3 months of the year Persephone has to live with her dark king under the earth. In those short, hard days nothing grows upon earth. Demeter mourns for her daughter in a dress of frost and snow. When the girl is restored to her, Demeter's heart grows light again. Spring comes and blossoms, and after this the summer opens out in glory, and then the rich harvest appears. Only when Hades claims his queen again does the year begin to sicken and die. So this myth is a love story between Hades and Persephone, but it's also an explanation for why we have seasons on Earth. So winter is when Persephone has to live those 3 months under the earth in the underworld. Demeter is so sad during those 3 months that winter comes and everything dies on the planet. Well, like the plants and stuff. When Persephone returns to Demeter in the springtime, Demeter's so happy that things start to grow again. And then autumn, she kind of starts getting sadder and sadder because she knows winter is coming. So this explains why winter is so harsh. Then it turns into a new beginning with spring. There's a joyful summer, and then autumn, things start to get colder and wind down again because Persephone is preparing to return to her husband Hades. Okay, last part. Then people remember Persephone, and they remember too that the dark and cold are only for a season, and that the winter woods always contain the promise of a new spring.